Hey everybody, we've got a really great video for you today because this is your definitive 2023 Jeep Wrangler buyer's guide. And in this video, Case and I are going over the entire Jeep Wrangler lineup for 2023, talking about the options you should definitely buy, but more importantly, the options you shouldn't.
Yeah, and there's a lot to go through here. Tons of powertrain options, tons of different trim levels, but let's start out by choosing whether or not you should go with a two-door or a four-door.
Yeah, so for 2023, that's going to be your first decision. Now, as a reference guide, we have driven just about every configuration of the current JL Wrangler. We've owned like 3 of them, and we've long-termed a bunch of them, so we know this model inside and out. And when it comes to deciding between 2 and 4 doors, there's a couple of things you got to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, practicality is one of them. Obviously, the four-door has a lot more space than the two-door. Two-door is a pretty compact vehicle, but if you're off-roading a lot, that small size of the two-door is really nice to have, not only for breakover, but just being able to fit down a trail. It's also a little bit lighter weight, and I think it looks really good.
It's also easier to park 2 doors versus 4 doors, and you do save some money. So let's take a look for 2023. Now, the entry-level Sport starts at $31,195 in 2-door.
Yeah,
but
versus a four-door. That's a big difference.
Yeah, up to $35,590. So you're talking several $1,000s. And let's take a look at like a Rubicon, for example, $43,295 in 2-door, and then $47,890 in 4-door.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. It's totally possible to live with a two-door, as you did. You owned a JL.
Now, there's a couple of key considerations you have to keep in mind. First of all, the 2-door will seat 4 people. The 4-door will seat up to 5. So you get an additional seat if you go up to 4-door. You also get a much larger trunk. So that's the biggest issue, in my opinion, 2-door to 4-door, is that the trunk of the 2-door will only fit maybe a toaster oven, whereas the 4-door will fit significantly more. And then towing capacity, you get something like 1,500 pounds more towing capacity if you go for the 4-door. Now, personally, I think the 4-door is actually the way to go.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
The vast majority of folks will agree with me because pretty much the majority of new Wranglers out there are sold in 4-door configurations. Plus, they're easier to resell in the secondhand market.
A 4-door is nice. I personally like the 2-door because that's just, to me, it speaks classic Jeep, but the 4-door is very practical.
Now, for the purpose of this buyer's guide, we're going to focus on the 4-door model configurations because that's the one that the vast majority of folks buy. Certain options are not available 2 to 4-door. For example, like the roof configurations, there's only certain roofs that are available in the 2 and the 4-door. Yeah. But we're going to stick with 4-door because that's the one that y'all out there are buying. So now that you've decided whether you want a 2 or a 4, let's talk about those roof configurations because there are a bunch of different options.
Yeah, full soft tops, full hard tops. There's also kind of a hybrid top that does a little bit of both. And they're also priced very differently.
Now, pretty much across the board, the Wrangler is going to come standard with a soft top configuration, and that's going to have a fabric canvas on the roof, and then you've got plastic windows for the rear side windows and the back window. And what do you think of the soft top, Case? What are some of the advantages?
I mean, the nice thing is that it's easy to take off. It's also pretty classic, and these days, the soft top is sealed surprisingly well. So I know you did a number of road trips with your 2-door Jeep that you sold recently that had the soft top, and how was the wind noise?
It was really pretty acceptable, actually. Even at highway speeds, it's not too loud. And the great thing is, I drove my Jeep year-round, and even in the winter, it's not too cold because Jeeps have the most incredible heaters of any car. So very livable with the soft top. Now, a couple of disadvantages when you go with the soft top: security.
Yeah, it's easy to cut into.
Yep, I mean, compared to glass and plastic,
you
right?
You can break into it with scissors.
Yeah, a sharp knife is probably gonna penetrate that material. Other disadvantage of the soft top is it's harder to get items into the trunk because you kind of have to unclip the sides and then fold it over to get stuff into the back of the soft top Wrangler. Now, going up to the hard top, depending on configuration, is going to cost you right around $1,700. On the Jeep, it's a 3-piece hard top. So what that means is that there are these 2 panels above the front seat passengers, which you can remove. It's called the Freedom panels, and then one giant one in the back, which you can take off as well.
Yeah, and that is for the base non-body color matched top. So it's just a black top. But if you want to step up to a body color matched top, it's going to be another $1,000. So about $2,700. which is a fair amount of money.
Yeah, and some people love the three-piece colored hardtop. I personally don't really see the advantage. I would save the $1,000.
I think the black top looks fine.
Now, I will say, I think for most folks, especially in colder environments, it's definitely worth the $1,600 or so to go for the standard hardtop. It's just the peace of mind of having it's fantastic. It's a little bit harder to take off and store if you want to go topless in the summer. Now, there is an option for a dual top group. This is going to run you right around $2,500, and that gives you a hard top with the soft top actually mounted underneath, so you can kind of fold it up. That does remove a lot of your trunk space. You can remove the top, the soft portion if you want. But another cool option which Jeep offers is the Sky One Touch Power Top.
Yeah, this is a very nice premium option at $4,100, almost $4,200. It's a hardtop that has a soft section in the middle that can slide back at the press of a button, which is really, really cool because it kind of gives you a little bit of the best of both worlds. That way you can have that open top experience, but still have decent security, still make it easy to get into the trunk. But you're paying for that feature. It's not cheap.
And you can remove the rear side windows as well. Now, it's $4,000, but people that have this top really, really love it because it gives you a convertible at the push of an electric button, which is fantastic. So of all these top configurations, there's a couple other Mopar options, like you can get little screens, you can get the Sunrider, which is pretty cool, but we're not getting into the Mopar stuff. For the standard configurations, which top are you getting?
Honestly, I would probably go for the black three-piece hardtop. Keep it cheap, keep it simple.
That's what I would do as well. It's a step above the soft top. There's also a premium soft top if you want a little bit more durability. But for me, the black three-piece hardtop is the way to go for most folks. All right, so we talked about tops. Now things are going to get really interesting because I want to dive a little bit into the engine configurations because the Wrangler has a largely unprecedented number of engine options.
Yeah, there's a ton of choices that you can pick from for powertrain, and it's really the best thing I think that the Wrangler has going for it right now. Everything from the base Pentastar all the way up to the big bad 392. But let's start at that base Pentastar V6.
So in most models, the standard powertrain configuration is going to be like a 3.6 liter V6 with a manual transmission, and this is an engine which you have used in just about every Chrysler, Stellantis, FCA product for the last 10 years.
Yeah, this V6 has been around, which is good because we know that they're pretty solid engines. These engines have seen so many miles over the many, many years that it's been around. And for a vehicle that you want to get out on the trail, be out in the wilderness, it's something dependable that you can be pretty confident is not going to leave you stranded.
Now,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, 285 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque, which in an open top, very vertical Wrangler is plenty of power for the configuration.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's great. Honestly, it's a fantastic engine, and people have done hundreds of thousands of miles in these engines since they debuted for the Wrangler in 2012. So really good engine. Now, if you don't want the manual transmission, oftentimes in a lot of configurations, the standard automatic transmission engine is a 2-liter turbo.
Yeah, and you get a little bit more torque with this turbo engine, but I know from the testing that you've done with it, the 2-liter is not your favorite.
It's not my all-time favorite. So horsepower is down a little bit compared to the V6, 270. Torque, as you mentioned, is up to 295. Now, the power delivery on this engine is pretty significant at the lower RPMs, and you kind of get a big surge of torque, and then it falls off a little bit in the higher RPMs. My big issue with the 2-liter, and this is just kind of nitpicking here, but the 4-cylinder turbo sound is just very vacuum-like. It sounds a lot like a hairdryer, and it just isn't a very attractive sound to me.
Yeah, and not that the Pentastar is a glorious sounding engine, but you know, I mean, when there's nothing really wrong with the base engine, and especially in terms of reliability, it doesn't give you a whole lot of motivation to switch over to a 2-liter.
The other thing about the 2-liter too is you've got the turbocharging, which adds a little bit more complexity, right? And fuel economy is pretty similar when you compare 2-liter to V6. So given the choice between the two, I'm probably going to lean more V6 and 2-liter turbo. Although folks have driven also plenty of miles with these, and they seem to be okay. We'll talk about this word e-torque here in a second because that gets a little bit interesting. But above the 2-liter turbo, we've got a number of other options, including the mighty 6.4-liter V8.
Yeah, well, this is the one to have if your wallet doesn't mind it. The 392 V8, another engine that's been around for a really long time, and it's such a glorious power plant.
Yeah, I mean, this engine's used in not only like the SRT products, right?
Yeah.
But also a similar version of it is used in like work trucks from the Ram 2500.
Base 2500s.
6.4 liter Hemi. Now it's pretty new overall to the Wrangler lineup. It only has been around for a couple of years, but it is the ultimate in the Wrangler expression, right? You've got this insane quad pipe exhaust, which just sounds berserk. 470 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds with this engine.
Which is impressive in a Wrangler.
But you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, it's really expensive, which we'll get into. But I think the coolest thing about this engine configuration in the Wrangler is that you can so clearly tell the Wrangler was not originally designed to have that much under the hood, so it just overwhelms the vehicle in the most entertaining way possible.
Right. Now, another engine which is really, really attractive to me is actually a hybrid configuration. It's called a plug-in hybrid, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so you've basically got a pretty substantial hybrid system in addition to the 2-liter 4-cylinder, and that gets you 470 pound-feet of torque, just like the 392, the Hemi. Not as much horsepower, 375 horsepower, but this is a substantial enough hybrid system that you can actually drive on all-electric power.
Now, this is a great option for folks that live in a house and have the ability to plug in at a garage. And the cool thing about the system is the battery is small enough where you don't really need to upgrade your house with a level 2 charging system, right? You could run this hybrid just by plugging it into a standard 3-prong wall outlet. Now, if you charge this battery up, you can go right around 21 miles or so on a single charge. You and Nathan did a test. You got closer to 30, right?
Yeah, I think we got a little bit closer to 30 miles on the road. If you're driving on all electric off-road, we found that you can really only go a couple miles just because the demand is a lot higher, but a claimed 49 mpge combined, which
it's pretty good. And like the
good.
off-road's going to depend a lot, right? Like I have driven up a mountain and only gotten a few miles out of it. But if you're on more flat surfaces, you can extend it much further. And the cool thing about this, right, the idea is you plug it in at home overnight when you're sleeping. You wake up in the morning, you got 25 real world miles to get to work. Come back, you can drive the Jeep on electricity, which is much cheaper than gasoline, and then use the gasoline engine for road trips, longer trips.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a commute as short as mine, you would very rarely be on gas power at all. And even if you're not plugging in at home, you can still use this. You can run on gas power alone, but it's really nice to have the addition of that hybrid system.
Now let's talk about the engine, which is no longer around. So I just got confirmation from Jeep that this engine, they're not taking orders on it anymore for the 2023 model year. It's been discontinued. This is the 3-liter EcoDiesel V6.
Yeah, and this is an engine that's had good times and bad, but the nice thing about it was that it was very torquey at 442 pound-feet of torque. Especially if you were going to hook up a trailer and be pulling anything around the mountains. Not that these are, necessarily towing vehicles, but if you were going to do it, that chunk of torque is nice to have.
It was nice to have. All right, now let's kind of talk about some of the different configurations and some of the different trims because we're going to be here for a hot sec.
Yeah, there's
that
a lot.
Is for sure. Now, the Wrangler has... wait till you see this. We can go into the build your own configurator here at the Jeep.com website. And for 2023, look at the sheer number of options. So you've got 4, 8, 12 different trims of the Wrangler.
Yeah, that's overwhelming. There's not a lot of vehicles that have that many trims to their lineup.
And we'll kind of give you a quick overview of what all the different trims are. So you really have 4 primary trim levels. So you have the Sport,
right,
which is going to be your entry-level Jeep. It's going to have the smallest wheels, the most basic interior, the least off-road gear. Now, from there, you've got the Sport S, which is like a Sport, but it has some nice goodies in it. So you get like alloy wheels, you get power windows, that kind of thing. Up from there, you have the Rubicon, which is really the off-road trim. That's going to have the locking differentials, the big tires, the sway bar disconnect, and then Sahara is really the luxury trim. So those are your 4 kind of main trim levels. And then there are offshoots on that, which really have branched into their own right. So there's a model called the Willys, which is, or how do you say it?
Willis.
Yeah, there's a big argument
right
online. It's Willis Overland was a big company, right?
Yeah.
And then it's spelled Willys. All the Jeep people call it Willys. So in this video, I'm going to call it Willys. But Willys is like the affordable off-road trim. You've got the Altitude models, which are some more luxury-oriented versions.
Right.
There's a right-hand drive for postal delivery folks. And then there's models like the Freedom, which is essentially various wheels and color packages on top of a Sport. There's a Sport Altitude, which is a more aggressive Sport. There's a Sahara Altitude, which is a more aggressive Sahara. There's a High Altitude, which has got all the luxury bits. So really the options are going to change a lot depending on the trim, but we'll show you some of the main ones. Now, one of the big changes for 2023 is that certain options are now standard. So on the 2022 model Sports, for example, they didn't come with cold air.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that?
Back in the day, you had to option for $1,000 air conditioning, which is something that you actually had to do on your Jeep, right?
I did, yeah, I sure did. And then the other thing which my Jeep had was this little itty bitty tiny screen. It was technically a 5-inch screen. In reality, it was like the size of a postage stamp.
Yeah.
But now for 2023, the Uconnect 4 with the 7-inch touchscreen display is standard. So that is an improvement. Now across the board, right, we are seeing some pretty big price increases. So for example, like a Sport for 2022 started at just under 30. A Sport for 2023 is going to start at closer to 31 grand.
Yeah.
And then models like the Sahara have seen even bigger price increases because some of the trim models have changed a little bit. So you're going to look across the board for price increases between $1,200 and like $3,500. Although some more stuff is now standard as well. So let's go ahead and price out a model, and we can show you some of the goodies that are available.
Yeah, so like you said, we're focusing on 4-doors, so we should go for a 4-door. I know for your Jeep in particular, the Willis model was a really good in-between of keeping it simple, keeping it basic, kind of like Jeeps historically have been, but still getting some decent off-road gear as standard on the Willis.
Yeah, and I had the Sport model of that trim too, so it was like more bare bones. But I think let's go ahead and price out a Rubicon because that's the one that everybody's really interested in.
Yeah, well, that gets you the most off-road gear.
So the first decision you have to choose, and once again, color palette's going to change a little bit. You got a bunch of colors, a couple of new colors.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, the High Velocity's bold.
It's not your favorite?
I do like this Earl, though. There's this new kind of like light blue. Looks really
That's
good.
Not bad.
So a couple of things that you got to decide right away. Lots and lots of different wheels, which is kind of up to preference, right? Whenever you see hood graphics and stuff, I find that it's typically not worth it. There's an option for a dual door group, and this is interesting. So if you want half doors, you can now get them on your Wrangler. Yeah, exactly. And the half doors are this kind of interesting thing where they remove the top portion of the door, and then you have like a little freedom to the outside world, but they're very expensive. You're going to be looking at close to $4,000.
Yeah.
So other options which are definitely worth noting, you can get cloth seats. You can also get leather seats, and the pricing is going to change on leather seats, but it's typically a couple of grand. Would you get cloth or leather in your Wrangler?
I mean, for the money, I would stick with cloth, especially because a lot of times in the summer, leather, especially with as intense as the sun in Colorado is, can get really, really hot and uncomfortable, and I find cloth year-round to be a little bit more comfortable to sit on, so I like the cloth.
I would stick with cloth too if it was my option. Now, Jeep seats, in my opinion, are notoriously terrible, but for sure, the cloth in some ways is a little bit more comfortable. You get a little bit more padding, it feels like. Now, in terms of the option group, we got a bunch of them. Now, this one is pretty common for most Jeeps. You can get a cold weather group, $895 on this Rubicon. That's heated seats, heated steering wheel, remote start-stop. Is it worth it?
I mean, remote start is nice because, again, cold climate out here now in the winter. If you can just look out your window and start something up, if you don't have a garage to put it in, that's really nice. So I would go with the cold weather group.
And I would do it for the heated front seats, which are berserk, and the heated steering wheel, which are incredible. LED lighting group, expensive $1,600, but it gives you LED headlights, LED taillights, that kind of thing. Would you go for it?
I wouldn't. I'm used to old school headlights. They don't bother me.
You got to keep in mind, these headlights are real bad. I mean,
is it worse than my second gen?
It might be worse than your second gen Ram. Yeah, these headlights in the Wranglers are really bad. I might consider. I'm a big deal. I'm like a in my personal Jeeps, I've always been like, oh, go for as cheap as possible. But the stock headlights are so bad, I might consider that. Now, some of the safety groups, I'm kind of lukewarm about. Like, you can get adaptive cruise, you can get full speed collision warning. There's a couple of different options for it. You can get like park sense, right? Blind spot detection. I'm not saying you skimp on safety, but a lot of these are more driver assistance technology safeties. And in the Wrangler, I typically skip them.
For me, I probably would as well. The steel bumper group, that, though, is a nice option to have in an off-roader. And, I mean, there's also aftermarket options for steel bumpers, but having it from the factory, crash tested, tested alongside the vehicle is kind of nice. It might be worth that upgrade.
And in this case, for $1,800, you get a steel front bumper and a steel rear bumper. That steel front bumper is ready for a winch, too, if you're into off-roading. And then this is a really interesting option, too, the Extreme Recon 35-inch tire package. So what this does is it, from the factory, gives you an upgraded suspension. It gives you a 456 axle ratio. It gives you they call it the third-gen heavy-duty Dana 44 axles. It gives you these big tires. And then GVW of 6,100, which does... Well, it puts the vehicle over that 6,000-pound increased depreciation tax advantage. So I think it's probably worth the $4,000 if you want the ultimate off-roader.
Yeah, I would say so as well. Again, I mean, $4,000 to get into 35s. There's less expensive ways to get into 35s, but the fact that that is engineered to work with everything on that
with
Jeep,
a warranty.
With a warranty, comes from the factory. It's probably worth going through the factory to add that option.
Now, this is a good option, too. The trailer, tow, and heavy-duty electrical group, $995. This gives you increased voltage out of the amperage out of the alternator. But more importantly, it gives you 7 and 4-pin wiring harness and the hitch and the auxiliary switches. And I added these auxiliary switches once to a Gladiator, and it's a huge job to do. You have to do it at a dealer to get them to program it. It's definitely worth the $995.
Yeah, even if you don't tow often, maybe occasionally you'll have to pull a U-Haul trailer or something. So it's nice to have. For $1,000, I'd say definitely worth it.
And those switches, if you want to put lights on your Jeep, they're super well integrated. Push the button and you're ready to go. So now we're back to powertrains, and this is where I want to talk a little bit about pricing. So the standard powertrain in this Rubicon is going to be the 3.6 V6 with the manual transmission. But if you want an auto, you're going to have to upgrade to either the 2-liter or the V6 e-torque. E-torque is like a belt-driven alternator. It's supposed to kind of do additional start-stop with a bit of torquiness off the line. Now, the cheapest way to get an automatic in this Rubicon is to go with the 2-liter, 4-cylinder, and that's going to bump the price up right around $2,000 in some cases.
Yeah, it's an expensive option, and I mean, we're both big fans of manual transmissions, but I have to say, the manual in this Wrangler is not a particularly fun one to drive. What would you say?
Yeah, well, it's a little sloppy, and the clutch engagement's not great. But here's the thing, though. So it's $2,000 to go for the 2-liter automatic.
Yeah.
$4,000 to go for the 3.6-liter automatic. So do you do the 2-liter automatic, or do you spend a little bit more and go for the V6 automatic?
I mean, it depends if I'm trying to build my dream Wrangler or if I'm trying to keep something basic and just simple and inexpensive as possible. Ideally, I'd kind of like to have that Pentastar.
Yeah, I would too. I would probably spend the additional money and get the Pentastar. But I'm sure I'm going to get comments because people do like that 2-liter. There's quite the following. So I want to talk about some other things. Let me build a Sport S. This is a very common trim, and we can check out some of the other options which you might find on the Wrangler because, of course, options are going to vary depending on the trim. The hinge gate enforcement by Mopar, if you're looking to put a big tire on there, it's going to reinforce the swing gate so you can put a big spare on there.
Yeah.
And then you have a ton of options for side steps and running boards. So depending on whether or not you want to off-road your Jeep or just get into your Jeep more easily, you've got a number of steps being tubular or flat style.
Yeah, we can skip the steps.
Okay, you don't want the steps?
Don't want the steps.
So another option, you can spend $1,300 for an Alpine premium audio system. Now, the thing with the Alpine, I don't actually think that the sound system sounds all that different from the bass system. The big difference is you get an enormous subwoofer in the back. So if you like your bass, get the Alpine. I probably wouldn't go for it.
Yeah, $1,300 to add a subwoofer essentially is a lot of money.
Some things which I would suggest you never, ever, ever buy, these additional interior features. The Jeep Trail Raider kit, I had this on a JK Wrangler. It's a bag and a toe strap and a glove and a D-ring for $200.
$200.
Horrible deal. Don't get the grab handle kit by Mopar. Just get them off Amazon. They're cheaper. Same thing with the grill, like sill guards. It's just not worth it. Now, if you have the option to go for the 8.4-inch radio and premium audio group, personally, I probably wouldn't do it. You know, you get Apple CarPlay, you get Android Auto, which is nice, but even on the base system, you still get Bluetooth, you still get touchscreen capability, and I think you even get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto even on the base system.
Yeah, I mean, even the smaller screen in the previous year that you had on your Wrangler was plenty functional. It wasn't spectacular looking because it was really, really small.
Right.
But now that screen is bigger. It's not going to be any less functional, and you can live with that just fine.
Yeah, I'd stick with the 7-inch screen. There's a couple other things which you can get on the Sport S, for example. We talked about cold weather, talked about some of the safety. You can do an option to just upgrade the headlights and the fog lamps and not the taillights. That's the one I would go for. Leave the taillights incandescent, who cares? But the headlights and the fog lights as LEDs, which are great. It's $1,200, but to upgrade to LED units on the aftermarket is also pretty pricey.
Yeah, if you're looking at anything high quality that's going to stay sealed from moisture, it's also going to be expensive.
Now, this is a great option if you do want the power sunroof. The Sun and Sound package gives you the power sunroof and some additional options for $4,200. So it's a really, really good deal if you want that power top. And once again, we're back to the engine transmission question on the Sport S Wrangler. So you can kind of dive around with this. So let's talk about some of our final thoughts and some of our final recommendations. And then I'm going to tell you a couple little hacks here in the Wrangler lineup.
We got to, before we go away from it, we got to look at pricing and everything on our favorite, the 392.
Okay, well, 392 starts at $1,000. 82 grand, and the options are pretty limited because they mostly come with everything.
Yeah, it's pretty much got everything that you could possibly want on it. All of the off-road gear. Do they all come with the retracting soft top?
I don't think they do. I believe that's an option.
That's one of the options?
The 392 is so impressive, it has bricked the computer here. So on the 392, you got a couple of different wheels. You got a couple of different tires. And then you can choose.
Okay, so it's an extra $2,000 if you want that one-touch power top.
Yeah, and then you can also get the 392 35-inch Extreme Recon package.
Which I feel like if you've got a V8, you need 35s too.
Might as well go for it.
Might
yeah,
as well.
If you're going for the ultimate Wrangler.
So that's going to end up, being a almost $100,000 Wrangler.
You're going to be pushing, 90 grand. So of all these trims and configurations, Case, which one are you going for?
I mean, if I'm a practical human being, I would do something like what you did. I would do
the Willys Sport.
A two-door Willys Sport. Keep it simple. Keep it just a raw off-roader. If I have tons and tons of money and I'm building my dream vehicle, it's the 392 all the way. It's some of the most fun I've had driving a vehicle at this job, period.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think that's great advice, but I do want to show you one hack which is interesting in the Wrangler lineup, and that is actually the 4xe. So for 2023, there's a new 4xe Wrangler. It's called the 4xe Willys or Willis, right? And check this out. So a standard Willis, if you get like no options on it, you get, super basic everything. You get the 7-inch screen. You get a manual transmission. You get no special goodies, right? Just a standard run-of-the-mill Willys. It's going to run you right around $42,000, for almost 43 grand, and then your lease estimate is going to be $445 for 48 months. Well, one thing that people often forget about the Wrangler lineup is that the 4xe model is actually a really good lease deal in comparison to other Wrangler models. So check this out. If we go to the 4xe for 2023, you're going to have the option to lease a nicer equipped model for $477, granted for 36 months, similar down payments on these models, but you get a lot kind of nicer powertrain with the 4xe.
Yeah, and probably going to save all of that in fuel. So
yeah, it's
if
probably
you're
worth
leasing,
it.
Yeah, that's a good option.
Yeah, the 4xe is honestly kind of my new choice. It's a lot of money, right? Especially if you buy it, right? It doesn't. It's like in this case, it's 12 grand more expensive, 14 grand more expensive than the non 4xe. But it really is a fantastic powertrain and gives you some cool options out on the trails. All right, there you go.
I think that's pretty much everything.
I think we cover most of it. Yeah. So let us know what you guys think in the comment section below.
Yeah, and that's all for this video, and we'll catch you guys in the next.
Ciao.